therapy is different than macronutrients, so proteins and carbs, fats, that kind of stuff. This is about understanding the biology of food. Food is something that it makes us very human, right? It's part of our culture. We all remember something, a smell or a taste from our childhood that our mom used to make that makes us feel connected to who we are, and no matter where you're from, you have the same connection to food. Now, the science is allowing us to dive deep into those things that trigger our brain and make us human, but we're beginning to understand how the food and what's in it, how our body responds to what we actually feed it at the molecular level. So think about it this way. If I had a drug or a new biotechnology to share with you, I would have to show you what the technology is. I'd have to explain to you how it works. What is the evidence, the preclinical or clinical evidence of when you actually administer it to a patient, and what the outcomes are, right? So we can do the exact same thing with food. And I came at this because I've had 30 years of life science biotechnology experience. In fact, I've been involved with 44 FDA-approved drugs and devices that have actually entered oncology, wound care, regenerative medicine, ophthalmology. So I know something about what the evidence it takes in order to be able to bring about a new game-changing intervention in different fields of medicine. Nutrition is the new frontier. It is a next frontier that affects all of us, because whether you leave this morning thinking about it for your patient or thinking about it for yourself, it's still going to actually make a difference for you. So let me kind of take you on a little bit of a journey now to explain to you how molecular nutrition connects to all of us and connects to how we think about our patients. Now, first of all, some of you, they think about food and health, go, oh no, Dr. Lee's going to talk about salad bars for the rest of the time. Not so. In fact, this approach of molecular nutrition allows people like me to go into the markets, the farmers markets, the European markets, the grocery store, to be able to look at the foods that Mother Nature has imbued with natural chemicals called bioactives. They're called bioactives because they are biologically active. You feed yourself a food, it gets absorbed. We used to think only about absorption in the stomach or into the small intestines, and everything else gets passed out the tailpipe. Now we're beginning to realize that once these substances are absorbed into our bloodstream, they interact with our cells the same way that medications do. And we have a huge history in the past half century of understanding how medications interact at the cellular, molecular, and genetic level. So now I'm going to actually show you what we're beginning to learn about foods that we find in the market and how they might actually interact with our cells. Now, not just raw ingredients, but cooked ingredients also can make a difference. And not just the salad bar, but even the foods that we enjoy eating. Here we are going to be spending a few days together in a place that's filled with restaurants, okay? And I want to tell you that from a food as medicine perspective, people like me, and hopefully a little bit of what I share with you today, is going to make you think about what you order on the menu just a little bit differently than before you sat down in a chair this morning, okay? And it doesn't matter what genre of food it is. It could be stuff you make at home, it could be stuff you order in a restaurant, it could be the thing that you didn't realize was good for you that also tastes good. And so what I want to actually give you a take-home message on is that we can love our food to love our health. What we need to have, the missing ingredient so far, has been the knowledge that we as clinicians can bring uniquely to the table to share with our patients, that we can continue to learn as the science comes out, but we can also walk the talk, right? So this is something that we're actually able to do. Many of us who trained, back in the 80s or 90s, or maybe even earlier, didn't have the advantage of having the science and the data, which is actually coming out now. Okay, so I want to talk about food, you know that. I've already kind of given you the cheat that I'm going to talk about foods that are actually good to eat, not just a salad bar. But I want to now do a little bit of a reset to give you the framework of where all this is coming from. And all this is coming from is physiology, our own bodies. We are all hardwired from the time we were developing in our mom's womb with biological health defense systems that we're firing on all cylinders on the day we were born, that will continue to fire until our very last breath. These systems help us stay healthy. This is the science of wellness. These are 5 health defense systems that prevent us from getting sick, right? People say, why did I get diabetes? Why did I develop Alzheimer's? Why did I get cancer? I'm going to challenge you to ask the question, why those questions are important. A real interesting question for us, thinking about things at a place like SAWC, is why don't we get sick more often? Why don't we develop wounds more often? Why don't, we're always stepping on things and tripping on things. Why don't we all develop chronic wounds more often than we already see them? And the answer really is, it's hardwired in our body to stay healthy. These are the systems, and I don't have time to go through all of them, but I want to walk through a few of them to show you how they connect to our food, because the food we eat either can destroy our health defenses, making us more vulnerable to disease, or they can shore up and activate our health defenses, raise our shields, so we and our patients are more resilient, more fortified, less vulnerable to the diseases that we fear the most. And so, although this is a wound conference, I could say the same thing to a cardiovascular crowd, to an oncology audience. It's the same message. Our bodies are hardwired to keep us healthy and well. This is not what was taught in medical school, but now is actually the core message is health first. We want to be well. Disease when we can't prevent that, and how do we actually treat disease? I'm going to offer to you that food is another tool in the toolbox, all right? So let's talk about angiogenesis and regeneration. So, first of all, food is a bottom-up approach for wound healing. You eat food, it goes into our body, it goes into our bloodstream, and that's where those bioactives and natural chemicals found in our food get to work. It's not actually from the top. We're not actually debriding and cleaning up and, prepping the wound bed. We are actually treating the wound from the inside out. And this is basically what happens with angiogenesis. You eat food, it goes in your stomach, gets absorbed in your small intestines, and those bioactives circulate, inside your bloodstream, into your capillaries, and they actually get to the wound from the inside to be able to affect what is actually happening beneath the skin, beneath the tissue that you can actually see. That's why it's important. So, what do we know about the things that can benefit, the foods that can actually benefit wounds, the process in wounds? I'm just showing you a few here. And if you were to go to the grocery store to pick some of these up, as I imagine you do when you go home, you might say, well, my kids like these, or I like these, or they're seasonal. But I can tell you the food is medicine movement, the science, is telling us that among many different bioactives in these apparently unrelated foods, they all have chlorogenic acid. Chlorogenic acid is a natural bioactive that activates our body's health defenses. Now, if you're someone like me and you're going out shopping and somebody tells me that, oh, apples have chlorogenic acid or coffee has chlorogenic acid, I always say, well, what foods have the most? What's the best food? I always ask that question. What's the most potent? Well, we're beginning to have an answer to that as well. And it turns out that organically grown fruits and vegetables and coffee beans actually have more chlorogenic acid. And the reason is because, and look on the upper right-hand part of the screen, I put a little insect there. That's part of, I did that deliberately, that is actually part of Mother Nature. Most plants that produce foods that we eat or drink actually live in nature with insects that nibble on their stems and leaves. Insects create wounds, pests create wounds on plants. Do you know what the plant's natural response is to being wounded by an insect? It produces chlorogenic acid. Chlorogenic acid is a defense system for the plant. So when you actually grow organically without pesticides, you have more natural pests around that are just nibbling on the stems and the leaves, and the plant's response is to create more chlorogenic acid in the coffee bean, in the apple, in the pear, in the artichoke. And by the way, do you know how much more an organic apple has or coffee beans have than a conventionally grown pesticide-treated fruit? 3 times more chlorogenic acid. That is that is a huge amount that you would actually get more benefit from. Now, this changed my mind when I saw this agricultural data from botanists, because I used to say, when people were recommending that I buy organic, I'm like, I don't want to pay more to get less chemical. But now, I am willing to consider paying more, and the price is coming down as well, to get more of something that's good. So this actually changes our idea of why we might want to choose organic in some cases. So chlorogenic acid, all right, this is a wound healing meeting. What does it have to do with wound healing? Well, it turns out the chlorogenic acid stimulates angiogenesis, all right? And actually it stimulates it even in the brain, in the lab. That's pretty cool, treating from the inside out. We know that chlorogenic acid also protects stem cells. MSCs are mesenchymal stem cells against oxidative stress. This is the oxidative stress from environment, from drugs, from lifestyle, from poor diet. It's protective against our stem cells within our bone marrow. And in fact, chlorogenic acid has even been studied for experimental wound healing. And what they found when they fed animals chlorogenic acid in a wound healing model and then did the biopsy of the healed wound to take a look at what they found, guess what? Chlorogenic acid, in a dose-dependent way, improves granulation by increasing the capillary density in the wound from the inside out. That's pretty cool. So this is actually how food as medicine is starting to enter our world, the wound healing world. Okay, here's another one, ursolic acid. All right, where's ursolic acid? It's in fruit peel. What does it do? Well, it turns out ursolic acid increases the production of nitric oxide. Nitric oxide is a signaling molecule in our cells. It causes vasodilation. It also recruits stem cells. It also stimulates vascular endothelial growth factor. I'm telling you the molecular biology a little bit here. But at the end of the day, VEGF, this growth factor, stimulates angiogenesis, which is what we need for wounding. And nitric oxide is important, whether you're talking about diabetic wound healing, venous ulcer healing, pressure ulcer healing, erectile dysfunction, a whole skew, coronary ischemia is all important. All right, ursolic acid. Now, this is actually a study that was done in the lab in which they took a lab animal and tied off its femoral artery, okay, on one side, on the left side, what you're looking at the screen. With the femoral artery tied off, you have no blood flow, you have an ischemic wound. I'll come back to limb ischemia in a few minutes, and you have this ischemic wound, and what happens if you don't treat it, the leg will become black and it will eventually fall off. That's actually the natural history of lack of perfusion. Now, if you take fruit, extract ursolic acid, put it in a chow of these animals and feed it every day, over 3 weeks, even when the hind limb is tied off, you will actually get revascularization. You'll bring new blood flow into the limb and salvage the limb. Pretty amazing. That this is, by the way, these are the same experimental systems we use for gene therapy, protein therapy, cell therapy. In this case, we just threw food extracts into it to see actually what it would do. Pretty cool, right? Now, this is in fruit peel, ursolic acid. It'd be a pretty tall order to eat a bushel of apples, right? But not such a tall order to be able to have some dried fruit, where you get the whole fruit shrunk down with the entire peel on it, all right? And you're like, well, I don't want to be eating fistfuls of dried fruit. Then go ahead and mix it with some nuts, and now you have trail mix. And what I want to show you, and really it's a take-home, is that this stuff is practical. This is science that can be translated. I got into this because even though I've worked in biotechnology is a decade-long enterprise to be able to help patients. Food as medicine has immediacy. Something I tell you today, you can put into action when you actually go back out into the snack bar. All right, so these are all practical things. Barley contains beta-D-glucan, all right? And beta-D-glucan has been studied in the heart. It upregulates vascular endothelial growth factor, exactly what you need for granulation and wound angiogenesis from the bottom up, from the inside up. Barley will do this. Now, how would you eat barley? Oh, by the way, this is from the actual study. In the heart, they tie off the left anterior descending artery, the major feeder artery to the heart. It would cause a heart attack. But you can see when you actually have beta-glucan, which is extracted from barley. On the right-hand column of pictures, and in the black bar, you get more VEGF, more vascular endothelial growth factor, and you get more blood vessels in the heart. This is inside, not even on the skin, but you can, I guarantee you, the same thing is actually happening underneath the skin of these animals. And had we done a wound healing model with the punch biopsy, you'd actually see the same tissue response. And this is systemic therapy using food as medicine. All right. Very easy to translate, right? It's fall. Make yourself some barley stew, add some carrots, a little bit of rosemary, a little bit of vegetable chicken stock. Not hard. It's tasty. This might remind you of home, and that's my point, is that when we communicate to our patients, we can tell them it's possible to eat healthy in ways that they can relate to, but if we only knew what the science that's emerging as food as medicine, it's very, very practical. They don't need to know the scientific stuff I'm sharing with you. All they need to know is that this can actually be a beneficial choice to actually make. Now this is a list, a partial list of foods that boost angiogenesis defenses. I know everybody likes to take their pictures. Please feel free. I have a book that has 200 foods listed. Eat to Beat Disease. You can get that anywhere books are sold. But this is actually, I just wanted to summarize. I can show you research data on every single one of these. And think about how you would design a Thanksgiving side dish using any of these ingredients. All right, stem cells, regeneration, very important. It's one of the frontiers of wound healing, right? Regenerative therapy. You go to the exhibit hall, you're gonna have people talking about their products actually stimulating regenerative healing. Let's talk about that. Starfish regenerate, salamanders regenerate, humans don't regenerate, right? Wrong. We all regenerate using stem cells that are left over from our development in the womb. These stem cells, you know, when you cut the cord, right, you got stem cells in the cord blood, but the rest of it actually is in our body. About 70 million stem cells when we're born, all get packed into our bone marrow, our fat, our skin, our gut. We got lots of stem cells around. Even in our heart and our brain still has some stem cells. So we can regenerate, just kind of slowly. And this is what it looks like. Stem cells also participate in vascularization, right there in that yellow circle. So dietary factors can stimulate stem cells, right? That's a pretty cool thing. Now we know if you have injury over the course of days, this is from a burn study, that from admission to hospital, if you track everyday stem cell levels in the blood, they go up, 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 up to help contribute to healing from the inside out, and then they come down once healing is actually complete. That's part of our wound healing, tissue repair response. Regenerative healing occurs naturally. And we also know that the worse the injury, the more stem cells are called out. So our body has a way of titrating how many stem cells we actually need for natural healing. Okay, so here's a problem. Conditions in the patients that we see, like diabetes, suppress the number of stem cells. They don't have as many. Their stem cells aren't quite as active. They're not quite as robust. And in fact, aging itself, our aging diabetic patient, all right, aging itself slows down and depletes your stem cells. So this is why regenerative medicine is such a hot topic today. You know, the concept of longevity, anti-aging, it's a whole field in and of itself. All you have to do is go on to social media or go online, and you'll see tons of stuff on stem cells and longevity. I can tell you this is something that naturally slows down as we get older. So the real question is there anything we can eat to actually stimulate our stem cells to help healing? The answer is remarkably yes. This was one of the most fascinating aspects I encountered when I started studying food as medicine. You gotta remember, I came from the biotech, kind of biopharmaceutical world, and to think about what cells can do, I set up lots of cell therapy programs for big pharmaceutical companies trying to inject things into the brain or for the heart or for the limb to try to salvage tissue and ischemic injury. When I saw that foods can actually have some of these same effects, it was really a jaw-dropper moment for me. Now, nobody thinks this image sucks, all right? Chocolate, dark chocolate, can actually stimulate stem cells. It's quite amazing. First of all, chocolate's a confection, but dark chocolate has high concentrations of cacao. Cacao is plant-based. Plant-based foods are good. Mother Nature's imbued cacao with polyphenols, and you can concentrate them in order to be able to have it. So dark chocolate has more the plant-based polyphenols. Now, studies have been done in elderly people, 60 and above, who have known established coronary artery disease, and what they've done is they've actually studied giving them dark chocolate as hot chocolate twice a day to see what would actually happen. And so here's a study, okay? A month of drinking a hot chocolate twice a day, 60 cups of hot chocolate will up to double the circulating stem cells in your blood. That's pretty amazing. And by the way, I don't have time to share this entire study with you, but they also did something called flow-mediated dilation to look at the health of the endothelium, the lining of blood vessels, and they doubled the response of endothelial function. So they actually were able to repair endothelium, the lining of the blood vessels, in people who already had established coronary disease. All right? Food as medicine isn't only about prevention, it can also be used to try to repair things from the inside out. Remember that eagle eye I showed you, flying across the Christmas trees? We've got to do more. We got to do better. We need to start to think about what's going on inside the tissue beneath the surface that we're not actually looking at. Black tea. Black tea will also stimulate regenerative medicine. It's quite amazing. Similar study, patients who were the second part of their life, baseline stem cell measurement, and just drinking 2 cups of black tea a day, even after a week, you can actually start seeing statistically significant rises in stem cells. Why? Because the polyphenols in tea, like catechins, actually activate the process, the cascade of events that lead to stem cell mobilization and homing. Goes right to where it needs to go. It's like a bow and arrow. You want to hit that bullseye, your body knows how to actually get those stem cells there. Black tea, dark chocolate can actually trigger that process so your body can do a little bit better. Pretty amazing. All right. Now, I'm showing you this because one of the big surprises that I had was that it's not just plant-based materials that actually are good for you, right? So I'm an omnivore. I'm not a vegetarian or a vegan, although I eat mostly plant-based foods, but I'll eat everything. I enjoy food, so I like tastes of food. Well, so I took an agnostic view. I don't really care what the food is. If it's going to be beneficial, I will actually study it. Well, it turns out that seafood is also really beneficial. And seafood is commonly eaten in many of the blue zones where people live long and live well at the same time. All right, so let's take a look at how this relates to wound healing. Here's a happy fisherman. He's got this gigantic Atlantic cod. What is cod? Smaller fish that eat smaller fish that eat plankton in the sea, and that actually it's originally a plant-based source anyway. And people say, well, why are you showing cod at a wound healing meeting? Well, 2 reasons. Number one, people used to always think it's salmon that actually is the fish that you need to eat, right? Chicken or salmon at a wedding, right? So it turns out that cod, salmon's got a lot of omega-3s. Cod and salmon has 5 times the amount of omega-3s as cod does, salmon does. But it turns out that human studies looking at cod for omega-3s shows that even the amount that's present in cod, most of it's in the skin, actually is enough to trigger the biological events that you need for healing, which is pretty cool. So we don't only need to go after anchovies and mackerel and sardines or salmon. We can even eat cod. I'm from New England, so Cape Cod is something I'm close to, but check it out. All right, let's take a look at this. Omega-3 fatty acids stimulate stem cells in diabetes. So a situation where you already have weak stem cells, omega-3s can actually prop those up and stimulate them. That's pretty cool. And like putting the picture together with what we're actually dealing with. Now, omega-3s can be found in supplements, they can be found in foods. I always say, get it from food. Supplements are for topping off, that's the word for supplements. But there are wound healing products that are actually also starting to look at omega-3s, so that's something to pay attention to. Here's another one, sea bass. This is not Mediterranean sea bass, this is Asian sea bass. All right, they're related in the same family. So it's wound healing. Isn't that amazing? Well, if you look at Chinese medicine and traditional Chinese healing cultures, they've actually found that the sea bass from Asia has been used by medicinal Chinese healers for years. They tell somebody who's sick, oh, have some steamed fish, it's going to be good for you. Have some fish soup, it's going to be good for you, right? It's that grandma said, Well, now we're beginning to take a look at that to see what actually is happening in sea bass. So let me just show you how remarkable this kind of food as medicine research study can be. And I'm showing you this because it's very important that, at least from my perspective, when you leave here, you're not just saying, oh, Dr. Lee is just one of those kale wavers. You know, he's given up on medicines. No, I helped to develop medicines. I'm saying that food is a tool in the toolbox. So let's take a look at the data. How do you study Asian sea bass? You catch them, you steam them, you remove the bones, you extract the material, you sonicate it with an ultrasound to break down the bits into tiny little pieces, and then you dry it. And then from that, you can treat an animal model the same way that you would see at a poster at the Wound Healing Society meeting, all right, or a plastic surgery meeting, and you take and you feed, but this time you feed the animal the food, the substance that came from the food that people are eating. Now, here's what we actually found. Amazingly, when you actually look at sea bass, aqueous extracted, so it's just steamed and with water extracted, that you can see there's a dose-dependent concentration effect of increasing angiogenesis. That top line with the red circles, those are blood vessels. All right, this is the same kind of system, immunohistochemistry, that we would use if we were studying a tissue-engineered substance or a growth factor or a gene therapy. All right. Now, what's in sea bass? We always need to know what the stuff is so we know how it would work. Turns out there's collagen peptides. Think bone broth. Okay, these collagen peptides actually break down into bioactive fragments that stimulate angiogenesis, lower inflammation, they stimulate fibroblast proliferation, and they also stimulate collagen deposition. This is actually the whole totality of the study that they did with the sea bass. Very sophisticated studies. Oral administration, healing from the inside out. What is going in that tissue, you can't see it from the surface, it's actually happening underneath. Pretty amazing. And by the way, if you are curious about this particular dish, which is steamed Asian sea bass with ginger, I'll tell you, here at Caesar's Palace, you can order off the menu. All right? Okay, what about tea? We all know green tea is good for you. Turns out that green tea can augment stem cell activity as well. And I'm not going to go into the deep science of this. Just know when you drink tea, it can help your stem cells that you already have work a little bit better for wound healing. So the vertical axis is a percent of the wound area, right? Smaller bar is better, the less wound. Look at this. When you combine EGCG, that's the catechin, the polyphenol from green tea, and you combine it with stem cells, you get a much, much smaller wound over the time of wounding post-surgery. This is preclinical, but it just shows you the power of what this can actually do. I'm just giving you a theme here. Food as medicine is putting bioactive stuff into the body, systemically absorbed and causing these biological reactions from the inside out. Here are some of the foods that stimulate stem cells. Again, I have long lists and recipes in my book, Eat to Beat Disease, which came out a few years ago. But just to give you a sample, this is not the salad bar. This is really the traditional ingredients that have been used by cultures that have looked at using food for healing for centuries. All right, I'm going to just wrap up by showing you one last thing, which ties together the microbiome and the immune system. And most of you probably have heard by now of the microbiome. Probably not through medical school or training, probably not through CME, probably through a friend, or maybe through internet searches, looking at gut health, or you're hearing about it from the public. This is where we are in the 21st century. Everyone has access to new information. The problem is, the challenge is how to actually sort through the facts from the fiction, and from the real information from the misinformation. And that's what I'm actually trying to show you today, is that people who study food as medicine seriously from the scientific background are able to actually deliver the hard punch, the data, to be able to show you where the actual information is coming from. So, microbiome, gut health, all right? And we've got 37 trillion bacteria in our body, all right? When I went to medical school, all right, I will tell you that we were all told, got to memorize all these bacteria. It was like a nightmare, honestly, to memorize all of them. We got to memorize the antibiotics that kill the bacteria, and all bacteria are bad, right? And you got to memorize how to actually kill the bacteria in our patient. Even in wound healing, biofilm must be bad, must get rid of biofilm. I will tell you that the science of the microbiome, and if I were a medical student today or advising a medical student, I would direct them into this field, because this is going to change everything we know about our own humanity as well as healthcare. All right, but these bacteria, most of the bacteria that we encounter in our lives are good bacteria. Every now and then we encounter a bad guy, and that can cause a lot of problems to us. But there's 37 trillion. By the way, there's only about 39 trillion human cells to our best count. So 37 trillion bacteria, we are 1-to-1, bacteria and human. In fact, that gives us the term for humans. We're not even really humans anymore, because humans would imply that we are all made of human cells, right? We're actually, there's a term for organisms that are composed of two different species. It's called a holobiont, H-O-L-O-B-I-O-N-T. That's what humans are. Part bacteria, part human. And by the way, it's not just bacteria, we're also made of fungi and viruses, etc. So now, having said that, let me actually show you, where does the bacteria live? Guess what? It lives everywhere. It's on skin, it's in every orifice, but a lot of it lives in our gut. Where in the gut? The gut's about 40 feet long, about the size of a Greyhound bus. The end of the gut is the colon, all right? And the colon loops around. From the small intestines to the large intestines, there's a thing called the cecum. It's kind of like a baggy pouch, all right, in the colon. That's where most of the gut microbiome lives. And by the way, what else is in the gut in the cecum? The appendix. So we used to think this was a vestigial organ. Now we think the appendix may be air traffic control for your gut microbiome. And we used to say, never mind the appendix, we'll take it right out. We're beginning to change our mind about this. This is how fast medicine is moving. The things that we always assumed to be true, maybe not so true if you look at the science. That's what is really cool about doing the kind of work that I do. Now, I want to give you like a really good, tangible analogy about the gut microbiome. It is like the Great Barrier Reef. All right, and for those of you who've ever been there, and I had the good fortune of being able to go to the Great Barrier Reef some years ago. It's amazing. It is this ecosystem filled with life like you can't believe. This is not Photoshop. This is an actual photograph of a snapshot in time of all the diverse life that is actually found in the Great Barrier Reef. There's so much life that you can't count them all, and you don't know exactly what everyone's doing, every species is doing, but you know they're coexisting and they're doing something good for each other. All right, and that's what the gut microbiome is. It's a population of bacteria and viruses and fungi that we don't have a full understanding of, but we know that they're actually doing good things for themselves, and in so doing, they're doing good things for us. So what are the things that we already know? We don't know everything. We only know the tip of the iceberg, but here's what we do know. We know that physiologically, your good gut health, good microbiome, actually releases short-chain fatty acids. We know that it's anti-inflammatory. These short-chain fatty acids lower inflammation in the body. We know a good, healthy gut microbiome streamlines lipid metabolism and insulin and glucose function in the body. We also know that the gut microbiome text messages our brain to release oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine. These are actually the emotional well-being hormones, social hormones. Releases oxytocin. Oxytocin is released by your brain when you see a friend at an airport. You're giving them a hug. You know, it's so good to see you. You feel great, right? Oxytocin is what floods out of your brain when you have a kiss. Not a peck on the cheek, but a good French kiss. And oxytocin rushes out of your brain for a few microseconds when you have an orgasm. That's how powerful our gut microbiome is. It text messages our brain and helps to control what's actually going on in our brain. So the gut-brain axis is a brand new area that we're studying, and it also stimulates stem cells, and it helps our immune regulation. How many of you are looking at an infected wound, can't quite get over the MRSA or the VRE or the Pseudomonas? Well, the clue, beyond throwing nuclear missiles of antibiotics, might actually be in the gut. And now we're able to sequence that to figure out what organisms are there. When you have an impaired gut microbiome, you have higher levels of inflammation, your stem cells aren't working as well, and your defensive immune system against infection go down, all right? This is called dysbiosis. And dysbiosis is a big problem, not just for wound care, or chronic wounds, but look at all these diseases that we're beginning to discover dysbiosis as a problem. I will tell you, the first one, Alzheimer's disease, to me is a stunner. Just last week, a paper came out where they took poop from an Alzheimer's patient and poop from a normal, from a person of the same age group who didn't have Alzheimer's group, took experimental rats. Rats are pretty smart. They have cognition, they got memory, they can learn. They did a fecal microbiome transplant from both groups, Alzheimer's and non-Alzheimer's, into the rats, and guess what happened? Normal rats getting normal poop just went on their way solving the maze, all right? Rats getting the poop, the gut fecal microbiome transplant from Alzheimer's patients started to have memory problems. They started to lose their ability to problem solve. And when they actually did the biopsy and a necropsy of the brain, their neurons detached. Amazing to think about how powerful this is, all right? Now, bring this to wound healing. Think about the impact if it's doing that to the brain. What is it doing to the skin as well in our patients? Okay, so I want to introduce to you this concept that I told you about gut-brain. Gut-skin is another axis, and this is where dermatology is really going to start to play a brand new role of characterizing this ecosystem on the skin and what we're actually doing for the skin. So again, this is something that is a whole field. I'm showing you whole fields of medicine that are unfurling. Now, foods can actually correct dysbiosis quickly. Kiwi fruit, even 2 kiwi fruits a day can start improving good gut bacteria like lactobacillus in 24 hours. You can take somebody who doesn't have very much and increase it by 35% of lactobacillus. In over 4 days, you can improve bifidobacteria. I'm not going to go into all the names of all the organisms. You should just know that these are the organisms that generate those short-chain fatty acids that are anti-inflammatory. How many times have we said wounds are characterized by chronic inflammation? They're stuck in the inflammatory phase. We've got to get them through this, right? Think about the implications of diet and altering the gut microbiome and improving the short-chain fatty acids that are anti-inflammatory, treating from the inside out, not just from the surface. Mushrooms will do the same thing. Mushrooms have beta-D-glucan that can actually improve your healthy gut microbiome. Here's another one. White beans, actually beans of all sorts, but white beans can also be a great way. These are cheap, by the way. This is from a can of inexpensive, pre-cooked, ready-to-eat white beans. They will also help your gut microbiome, all right? So very important, very practical, very easy to understand. Fermented foods, of course, kimchi, sauerkraut. This is pao chai, which is a pickled Chinese cabbage. Yogurt as well, for those of you who eat dairy. Yogurt actually has many of these healthy gut bacteria. By the way, I'm going to give you guys a little pro tip here. Let me see a show of hands. If you eat yogurt, when you buy yogurt, do you get full test high-fat yogurt or low-fat yogurt? How many get low-fat yogurt? All right, that's a lot of hands raising up. I will tell you, it's a mistake. It's a mistake because low-fat yogurt, when you remove the fat, doesn't taste like yogurt. It tastes more like milk. And so what these manufacturers do is they add emulsifiers into the yogurt where the fat's been removed. Those emulsifiers are now being discovered to damage your gut microbiome. Be very careful with low-fat yogurt. The full test yogurt actually doesn't raise your blood lipids. You know why? Because the yogurt and the bacteria feed your gut microbiome, which streamlines your metabolism. So that's a whole other topic. I teach a course on metabolism and food. But just so you should know, like all these little tips that are practical in nature. Here are some of the foods that beneficially alter your gut microbiome. By the way, we've all gone through this. You know, you wake up one day and you're like, oh man, I feel crampy, gassy. You know, I don't feel so great. That's a signal. Listen to your body. That's your signal. Your gut microbiome's not happy. Not happy. Don't just tough it out. It's not necessarily going to be good for you. Those vulnerable moments. Eat something that can, with dietary fiber, prebiotics, or probiotics that can help your gut microbiome. I'm calling your attention now to one bacteria called Akkermansia muciniphila. This is way ahead of the curve, all right? This is like beyond the edge of the envelope for you guys. But if this were an oncology crowd, you guys would say, oh, I know about Akkermansia. Akkermansia muciniphila is a gut bacteria that was only discovered in about 20 years ago. So it's pretty new. Think about all these bacteria, right? So Akkermansia muciniphila, Akkermansia is the first name, muciniphila is the last name. The last name muciniphila means that it loves mucus. loves to grow in mucus. It eats the mucus. And so in our gut, it thrives when the normal mucus lining of our colon is secreted, right? So, and by the way, mucus sounds disgusting, but it's actually completely normal. You need something to actually be able to smooth the passage of all that material all the way so you can actually pass it, right? So mucus is good, Akkermansia grows in it. Well, it turns out this one bacteria, which I think over the next 10 years in the wound healing field, you're going to be hearing more and more and more about Akkermansia. So maybe you'll remember you heard it here first if you don't know already. Notice, this bacteria is a guardian of our health. It's a guardian of our immune system. It's a guardian of our metabolism, and it's a guardian of our brain as well. And it plays a fundamental role for wound healing. So I'm going to share with you some information now that is just sort of it's smoking hot, tip of the spear stuff, and show you where I believe the gut microbiome might go for wound care. All right. We know, for example, that if you integrate Akkermansia, you can actually heal experimental diabetic foot ulcers. So here's the quick cut to the chase. If you put it into nanofibers, you put it on top of a wound, wait a minute, Dr. Lee, you're telling me you can actually put bacteria onto a wound? Aren't we trying to remove bacteria from the wound? Experimentally, we're already starting to think about taking this guardian good bacteria and seeding it into the wound bed. How disruptive is that idea in chronic wound care? This is what's going to be happening, and this is one of the bacteria that's starting out. We also know that you can eat foods like cranberries, Thanksgiving's right around the corner, to be able to grow your own Akkermansia. This is going to be on most of our tables in a couple of weeks, and cranberries actually help our gut secrete that mucus that the Akkermansia grows in. And I can tell you, I've used cranberries and other foods with patients in order and measured their Akkermansia, because we can get stool samples and sequence them using 16S sequencing. Okay, very complicated to be able to look at what organisms are actually there. Low Akkermansia before feeding cranberries and other foods, higher later on. In fact, we can triple the amount of Akkermansia using diet in just about 12 days. So, here's another one, pomegranates. Pomegranates are a fall-winter fruit, so it's seasonal. Turns out the pomegranates have a bioactive called elagitannins that stimulate the growth of Akkermansia. It stimulates the mucus. The Akkermansia grows, and it's really, really quite potent. Now, I mentioned to you that you would hear about this in the oncology field because one of my colleagues, Laurent Zivogel in France, made some stunning discoveries about Akkermansia. And I'm going to show you that in just a moment. Why am I showing you pomegranate and Akkermansia with this image? At this inject them, you do all kinds of fancy things. Not ready for prime time yet. It's a long ways to go for that. But guidelines have been mentioned. Guess what? In these guidelines, which you can check out in the Journal of Vascular Surgery, nowhere does it talk about nutrition. Nowhere does it talk about microbiome. So this is only, 4 years old, and it's already outdated because we need to start thinking about emerging data. Okay, question. Is there a role for Akkermansia in arterial ulceration? Well, this is very intriguing data that's coming out. This is from the journal called Microbiome. There's actually a journal, peer-reviewed journal, indexed on PubMed called Microbiome, and just last year, they showed that Akkermansia releases those short-chain fatty acids and can actually reduce plaque formation. Think about people with arterial ulcers, right? They have plaques that get stented. What happens to the stent? It reoccludes. The plaque forms all again. And we don't really have a good way other than using statins to prevent that. Well, it turns out this bacteria seems to be able to prevent plaque reaccumulation, plaque growth. It's pretty cool. This is an animal model. You give them nicotine, the plaques, start to form like crazy, and you can see them in the histology. You give them nicotine plus Akkermansia. This is as a probiotic, and you can kind of see the plaque doesn't form quite as much. And look at the pink bar, the smaller bar on the right-hand side. It's statistically significant. You can reduce plaque formation. So in patients with arterial disease, arterial ulceration, would this bacteria play a role? And if so, is there a supplement? Is there a dietary intervention? Is there a way of measuring your gut microbiome? This is the stuff for research going forward, but I want to show you just how profound this is and where some of the directions might be coming into the future. Now, this is exciting. This group, Laurence Vogel is a co-author, and Guido Krummer, her husband, actually also worked on this. Oral administration of this bacteria increases metabolites that slow down aging and help to reverse cancer, help to actually suppress and combat cancer. That's pretty cool, right? Now we're talking about some really mind-blowing things of the gut microbiome. So let me just show you what this pomegranate can actually do. Turns out the pomegranate in cancer patients can actually grow more Akkermansia. And one of the things that we all have been touched by cancer. All of us know somebody, you know, maybe our family, maybe a friend or a colleague, maybe ourselves, have been touched by cancer. And today, in 2023, if you have cancer and your oncologist is not having a discussion with you about immunotherapy, immune therapy, then you're not actually seeing a state-of-the-art oncologist. Immunotherapy is the most natural way of battling cancer in the world, because it's a treatment that you give to a cancer patient that activates your own immune system, your own health defense, all right, that the microbiome helps to support. That when your immune system is strong, it conducts surveillance to wipe out cancer cells, even if it's very advanced, right? Okay, so let me just show you. This is our amazing former president, Jimmy Carter, longest lived president. He's going to turn 100 this year. He, about 10 years ago, you know, after he finished his presidency, he went off and did humanitarian work, Habitat for Humanity under the Georgia sun. He got melanoma. The melanoma spread to his liver, spread to his brain. This is about 10 years ago. Game over, right? You've got brain metastasis, stage 4 melanoma. Forget about it. This is like time for hospice and palliative care. I would imagine most of us would have nodded our head to say, oh yeah, like that, I recognize that's probably the fate. President Carter was fortunate enough to enter one of the clinical trials for immunotherapy, which is now approved. There's about a half a dozen around, and this is the kind of response, this is not President Carter, but this is the kind of response we can do. Metastatic melanoma to the brain, all right, pre-treatment, you can see that lesion in the circle, red circle. After several infusions of the immunotherapy that wakes up your own immune system to go after that cancer, to clear up the health, your own health defense system to clean up the cancer, you can actually turn stage 4 cancer into stage 0 cancer. I can tell you, I've treated the first patient I had who did this. I was sort of amazed. Maybe it's a fluke. You know, we see these flukes all the time. Now I'm on to about a dozen patients that actually had stage 4 to stage 0. Okay, this is happening. In 2023, we are beginning to do the impossible is becoming possible. And this is something we need to take home with us from a wound healing perspective as well. The science and the technology and the insights we have about what we can actually do to manipulate our own health defenses is changing the game everywhere. Now, turns out that Akkermansia is the key to this benefit, because only about 20% of patients who receive immunotherapy, if they have melanoma, will respond the way that you see right here. What a bummer, 80% don't respond. Well, this is what the research is showing. If you actually look at the gut microbiome, you find that people who are missing Akkermansia are not going to respond. And so at ASCO last year, the American Society of Clinical Oncology, they've now gone and found, in addition to Akkermansia, 8 other bacteria that you want to have if you're a cancer patient. And I can tell you, most oncologists are just beginning to think about, should we be sequencing our gut microbiome? I would challenge you in the wound healing community to think about sequencing, if you're interested in research, sequencing the gut microbiome. See if there's patterns in the healers versus the non-healers, the responders versus the non-responders. We might just discover something that could be groundbreaking. All right, it could be anybody in this room. It could be a young person that you're mentoring. Encourage them to look at this because it is profound. It's changing the game in cancer medicine. All right, so what is Akkermansia doing? You eat pomegranate, it creates gut mucus. The Akkermansia loves to grow in that mucus. It's like the fertilizer, the topsoil you're putting down for your annuals in your summer garden. The microbiome thrives, and when the microbiome thrives, guess what it does? It talks to the immune system. This is how these systems are. It lowers inflammation, but it ramps up your defensive T cells, your dendritic cells, all right, your B cells. It really primes your immune system, this army of super soldiers that go out to actually do their thing. Think about the patient with the infected wound. They can't quite get over their infection. Are they actually not having the right microbiome? This is the questions that are being asked right now. Now, for cancer, all right, you hang a bag of immunotherapy, it takes about 25 minutes to infuse this. It's almost no side effects during the infusion. Cancer immunotherapy requires this population of activated immune cells that are influenced by akkermansia, that is influenced by mucus in the gut, that's influenced by foods that we eat. Now you can kind of start connecting the dots. This is why the food that we eat matters. This is why people are talking about food as medicine. This is actually the tool in the toolbox we've forgotten about, because before there was pharmaceuticals, every doctor just used foods and herbs and stuff like that in their armamentarium. It's only since the 1940s, and with the industrialization of medicine and all these incredible innovations I've been part of as well, that we've started to forget about food as a tool in the toolbox. Now we're coming back to it, but now we have the science to begin understanding what could be going on. And so this is not about blowing off your nutrition to just